Christmas is supposed to be a time of joy and magic, but for these people it turned into a living nightmare. What would you do if the knock on your door wasn't Santa but something far darker? These 3 true Christmas stories will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the holidays. Keep watching, each story gets darker, and you won't believe how they end. The Wilsons' annual Christmas party was the pinnacle of their year, a time for laughter, love, and memories framed by the soft glow of twinkling lights. Their house was the epitome of holiday cheer, the kind of setting that belonged on a snow globe shelf. Friends and family packed the living room, their voices melding into a warm hum around the towering Christmas tree, decked in ornaments collected over generations. Sarah Wilson flitted between guests, balancing trays of cookies while her husband, Mark, showed off his signature eggnog recipe. Their daughter, Lily, giggled in delight as she played with her cousins, weaving between the adults and the glowing tree. A camera flashed every few minutes as Sarah urged the guests to pose for photos. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned, the warmth of the evening retreating with each departing guest. By midnight, the Wilsons were left with their usual cozy trio. Exhausted but happy, they decided to review the photos on the digital camera, laughing at candid shots and marveling at the festive chaos they'd captured. Then they noticed it. In one picture, behind a group of guests huddled around the fireplace, was an extra face. It was faint, blurry, shrouded in shadow, and perched unnaturally above the shoulders of anyone in the shot. Could just be a smudge on the lens, Mark said. But as they scrolled through the photos, the figure appeared again and again, always in the background, always indistinct, yet disturbingly human. They laughed it off, calling it a photographic glitch. But the laughter faded as the weight of unease settled over the room. Lily, normally fearless, asked to sleep with the lights on. The next morning, Sarah woke to find the house colder than usual, though the thermostat glowed its usual cheery 72 degrees. She passed it off as her imagination, but when the Christmas lights flickered as she made coffee, the fleeting thought that something was wrong began to take root. The peculiarities multiplied like ornaments on their overcrowded tree. Glass baubles fell from branches in the dead of night, shattering on the hardwood despite no one being near the tree. The sound would send Mark scrambling from bed, only to find nothing amiss but scattered shards and Lily crying softly from her room. Then came the whispers, faint and indecipherable. They blended with the soft crackle of the fireplace. Sarah swore she heard her name murmured as she folded laundry. Mark claimed the voices grew louder near the tree. Lily was the first to see the figure. One evening, she stopped mid-drawing and pointed toward the window. "He's out there," she whispered, her eyes wide. When Mark pulled back the curtain, the snow-covered yard was empty. Just her imagination, they assured each other. But Lily's claims persisted, growing more specific. The man, she said, was tall and dressed in old clothes. He smelled like burning wood. Sarah revisited the photos. The shadowed figure wasn't just there. It was moving. With each successive photo, it edged closer to the family, its indistinct features slowly sharpening. By the last photo, it stood directly behind them, its face partially obscured, but its eyes glinting like reflections off the icy window. Panic set in. They deleted the photos, but when they checked the camera an hour later, the pictures had returned, untouched, the figure as clear as before. The house felt more oppressive. The chill became biting, and the whispers grew bolder, twisting into fragmented sentences they couldn't fully understand. The Christmas lights flickered in time with the whispers, creating an eerie synchronization. Mark unearthed the house's history from old records at the library. The Wilsons' home, once a cheerful gathering place, had hosted a tragic Christmas party decades ago. The details were chilling. An uninvited guest, a confrontation turned violent, and a death overshadowed by holiday cheer. No one remembered to report the missing guest until the new year. By then, the snow had buried all evidence of what happened that night. Determined to confront the spirit, they sought out a medium. But the spirit, tethered to the family through the photos, wasn't interested in peaceful resolutions. It wanted more. The seance turned violent as objects flew across the room. The lights extinguished, and a single voice broke through the chaos. "You shouldn't have taken my place." Their night was only beginning. The family's living room had transformed into a battlefield of flickering shadows and frantic whispers. The medium, a wiry woman with iron-gray hair and an air of solemn authority, held a trembling candle as the seance began. She called for the spirit to reveal itself, her voice steady despite the cold drafts circling the room. The Wilsons sat in a tight circle, clutching each other, their breaths visible in the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the shadows stretched unnaturally, pooling in corners and creeping up the walls. The whispers grew coherent, a single phrase looping like a broken record. "You shouldn't have taken my place." The medium's candle flickered violently before extinguishing altogether. The Christmas tree lights buzzed and surged, casting distorted shapes onto the walls. A guttural voice reverberated through the room, chilling them to the bone. "You have what's mine." Mark leapt to his feet, demanding the spirit explain itself. The response came not in words but in action. The room erupted into chaos. Ornaments exploded from the tree, shards embedding in the walls. A photo frame shattered, revealing a hidden snapshot of the Wilsons from their party. There it was again, the shadowy figure, now fully formed and unervingly distinct, standing just behind them. Its face was pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a jagged smile stretched too wide. Its blackened fingers clawed at the edges of the photo as if trying to escape. "It's him," Sarah whispered, paralyzed. "The guest from the old Christmas party." The medium's voice cut through the chaos. "You invited him," she hissed. "In spirit, if not in name. He needs a place to belong, a role to fill." They had to act fast. The entity wasn't merely haunting them. It was attempting to force its way into their family. The Wilsons scrambled to destroy the photos, but every attempt failed. Sarah burned one in the fireplace, only to find it intact again in her hand moments later. Mark shredded another, only to see the fragments reassemble before his eyes. The medium urged them to dig deeper. "Recreate the night," she said, her voice strained with urgency. "Let him finish what was denied." In the attic, Mark unearthed a brittle box of decorations left by the previous owners. Among the baubles and faded tinsel, he found a list of names, guests invited to that fateful party decades ago. At the bottom of the list was a single, scrawled name, Emery Stokes. The family staged an unsettling reenactment, dressing as though it were Christmas Eve from decades prior. Mark wore a vintage suit pulled from the attic, while Sarah put on an old velvet dress. Lily was too terrified to participate but stayed close, clutching her stuffed bear. The medium guided them, her voice a mix of authority and desperation. "Speak his name. Acknowledge his presence." "Emery Stokes," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. The lights extinguished, plunging them into darkness. A cold wind swept through the room, bringing the acrid smell of burnt wood. Slowly, Emery materialized by the tree, his form more solid than before. His face twisted into something between relief and malevolence. "You see me now," he rasped. The medium intervened, her chants rising over the sound of shattering ornaments and the relentless whispers. The family held hands, their grip tightening as Emery's form began to dissolve into the flickering lights of the tree. But Emery resisted. The air grew thick and Lily began to cry. Her tears seemed to draw his attention, and he turned toward her, his jagged smile widening. "A new place," he hissed. "I'll take hers." Mark lunged forward, blocking the path between Lily and the spirit. The force of the collision sent him sprawling, his body racked with an icy pain that felt like it came from another world. The medium shouted instructions over the chaos. "He can't stay if the family doesn't let him in." The Wilsons, trembling and desperate, shouted as one, "You're not welcome here." With a final, ear-piercing shriek, Emery's form dissolved into a swirl of shadows, which spiraled upward and vanished into the ceiling. The house grew silent. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by an almost suffocating stillness. But the damage was done. The Christmas tree lay toppled, its ornaments shattered across the floor. The photos, now blank, were scattered like confetti. The medium, pale and shaken, warned them that such entities often left traces. "The door was opened once," she said gravely. "It could open again." Mark's hand brushed something cold under the tree. An old, tarnished invitation addressed to Emery Stokes, the handwriting eerily familiar. Lily clung to Sarah, her wide eyes staring at the empty space Emery had occupied. "He's gone, right?" she asked, her voice trembling. Sarah couldn't bring herself to answer. That night, as the Wilsons tried to salvage what remained of their holiday, the whispers returned. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. And somewhere in the attic, buried beneath forgotten decorations, a brittle photograph of the Wilsons began to darken. In its corner, a shadow reappeared. The snow lay thick and untouched in the countryside as Rachel scanned the gilded invitation she had received earlier that week. The ornate lettering promised an unforgettable Christmas gala at Winterwood Estate, a secluded Victorian mansion nestled deep in the hills. Rachel, ever the enthusiastic organizer, had persuaded her friends to join her for the exclusive event, the allure of opulence and mystery too tempting to resist. Mark, her pragmatic boyfriend, had reluctantly agreed, wary of the vague details surrounding the event. Alongside them were Ellie, Rachel's quiet but sharp-witted cousin, and a few other acquaintances who had also been charmed by the promise of an extravagant holiday adventure. Despite the mansion's remote location, a private shuttle had been arranged to transport them from the city, adding a layer of luxury that further dispelled any reservations. As the group approached Winterwood, the mansion loomed against the darkening sky, its snow-covered spires and arched windows illuminated by glowing string lights. The estate seemed alive with the spirit of Christmas. Wreaths hung on heavy oak doors, and a towering tree stood visible through the grand windows, its ornaments glittering like jewels. The grandeur captivated them, sweeping away lingering doubts. Inside, the atmosphere was magical. A symphony of holiday music played softly, and the scent of pine mingled with the richness of mulled wine and spiced cookies. Attendants, dressed in formal attire, ushered the guests into the foyer, where roaring fireplaces cast a warm glow across the polished wood floors. Gifts were stacked neatly under the tree, and every detail of the decor exuded wealth and meticulous planning. The festivities took an abrupt turn as the clock struck 8. A faint metallic clang resonated through the house, and the main doors sealed shut. The soft hum of conversation gave way to confusion as the guests realized they were trapped. Moments later, a voice echoed through hidden speakers, welcoming them to a Christmas challenge designed to test their wits and resilience. The rules were stark. Solve puzzles in the designated rooms or face severe penalties. Escape was contingent on their success. The group's initial disbelief quickly turned to unease. The attendants had disappeared, and the festive cheer of Winterwood took on a menacing edge. Lights dimmed, casting long shadows on the walls, and faint whispers seemed to emanate from the darkened corners. The first task was presented through a cryptic note that appeared on a silver tray, instructing the group to enter the candy cane room. The room was an unsettling contrast of playful aesthetics and hidden danger. Brightly colored walls painted with candy stripes surrounded a labyrinth filled with towering candy canes. At first glance, it seemed whimsical, but as the group navigated the maze, it became clear that some candy canes were razor-sharp, capable of inflicting serious harm. As they progressed, faint mechanisms clicked beneath their feet, and sections of the maze shifted unexpectedly, creating dead ends or forcing them closer to hazardous areas. Ellie, drawing on her love for puzzles, deciphered patterns in the maze's movements, guiding the group to the exit just as the floor began to tilt precariously. They emerged shaken but unharmed, their relief short-lived as they were ushered into the next room. The next challenge was housed in a circular chamber dominated by an enormous snow globe. Its swirling flakes glimmered unnaturally, and as the group approached, the globe began to spin, revealing a miniature replica of Winterwood Estate inside. Moments later, the chamber filled with icy wind and artificial snow, quickly reducing visibility. The group soon realized that clues for escaping were etched onto the rotating base of the snow globe. Retrieving them, however, required navigating the room while avoiding rapidly freezing sections of the floor. The icy wind stung their faces and hands, and tension rose as the first cracks appeared in the floor. Mark's practical thinking and Rachel's leadership helped them retrieve the final clue just before the snow globe's rotation grew too violent to approach. By the time the group reached a temporary respite, exhaustion and fear began to take their toll. Whispers spread among them, accusing murmurs about why they had been invited and who might be behind the macabre spectacle. Old grievances surfaced, and alliances fractured under the strain. Suspicion fell particularly on Rachel, whose enthusiasm for the event had been the catalyst for their involvement. The group's cohesion weakened further in the face of the following challenges. Personal secrets came to light, revealed through taunting messages left by the unseen host. Each revelation tested their trust, exposing vulnerabilities that the host seemed to exploit with surgical precision. As the night wore on, the mansion's traps grew deadlier, the puzzles more psychologically demanding. Each room seemed to peel back another layer of the group's collective humanity, forcing them to confront not just physical peril, but the consequences of their own flaws and fears. By now, a grim pattern had emerged. The host, unseen but omnipresent, was not merely testing their intelligence or teamwork, but actively unraveling them, one by one. Tensions reached a boiling point when a member of the group vanished after failing to solve a puzzle within the allotted time, their screams echoing through the mansion. Rachel began piecing together fragments of evidence, noting inconsistencies in the invitations and the timing of the host's messages. Suspicion shifted once more, this time toward someone within their ranks. The group was no longer just fighting for escape, but to uncover the truth about who had brought them to Winterwood, and why. The deeper the group ventured into the mansion, the more sinister it became. The rooms were no longer just puzzles but psychological traps, each exploiting their fears and weaknesses. One chamber forced them to sift through a Christmas feast, the table laden with sumptuous roasts, gleaming fruits, and rich desserts. Only later did they realize the hidden mechanisms. Some dishes were poisoned, while others triggered dart traps embedded in the walls. Mark, sharp and calculating, took charge, analyzing the clues with a lawyer's precision. Ellie's puzzle-solving skills continued to shine, but she grew quieter with each passing hour, visibly shaken by the high stakes. Tensions simmered between Rachel and the others. More and more, it seemed as though someone among them knew more about the party than they had let on. The host's voice taunted them intermittently, deep and disembodied, delivering cryptic riddles and escalating threats. With each completed challenge, their numbers dwindled, casualties piling up from a misstep here, an untimely panic there. Survivors were scarred, physically and emotionally. The breaking point came in the mansion's attic. The room was filled with old photographs, documents, and family heirlooms, all tied to Winterwood's long-forgotten history. Ellie, poring over the dusty records, uncovered the name of the estate's former owner, a disgraced entrepreneur named Samuel Grant. Known for his holiday parties that lured guests into debt and despair, Grant had disappeared decades ago under mysterious circumstances. It became clear that the party had not been a random invitation. Everyone in the group had some connection to Grant or his shady dealings. Rachel, unbeknownst to her friends, had been the most deeply entangled. Her family's bankruptcy had roots in a business deal gone awry with Grant's descendants. As they pieced together the truth, Rachel's guilt became evident. While she hadn't orchestrated the event, her involvement had placed her at the center of the host's plans. The revelation fractured what little trust remained among the survivors. The host announced the final challenge, a choice that would decide their fate. In the grand ballroom, the surviving members found a glittering Christmas tree adorned with ornaments, each bearing a name of someone still alive. Beneath the tree was a stack of boxes, each wrapped meticulously in shimmering paper. The instructions were chillingly simple. Rachel must choose one box and open it. Each box contained an outcome: freedom, death, or an unspecified twist of fate. The others could not intervene. Any attempt to alter the choice would result in their immediate elimination. The air was thick with tension as Rachel approached the tree. Mark's skepticism had hardened into resentment. Ellie, trembling, pleaded silently with her eyes for Rachel to make the right decision. The host's voice offered no guidance, only laughter that echoed through the cavernous room. Rachel hesitated, her hands hovering over the boxes. She thought of the lives already lost, the faces of those who had trusted her leadership. With a deep breath, she made her choice and unwrapped the box. The moment the box opened, the mansion trembled. The host's voice roared with delight, declaring the game over and the house's final act underway. Flames erupted from the hearths, spreading rapidly as the ornate woodwork of Winterwood became an inferno. The survivors scrambled for an exit, the once locked doors now flung open, their freedom tauntingly within reach. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of burning pine as they raced through the hallways. Ellie tripped, her foot caught in a twisted garland, but Mark and Rachel turned back to pull her free. As the group spilled out into the snow-covered lawn, the mansion was consumed in a blaze, the flames dancing like mocking spirits against the night sky. The host's laughter echoed one last time before being swallowed by the roar of the fire. In the aftermath, the survivors huddled together in silence. The snow fell gently now, masking the scars of the night. Rachel's hands shook as she recounted her choice, the weight of the lives lost pressing down on her. They had escaped, but they were not unscathed. Mark's skepticism had hardened into mistrust of everyone around him, including Rachel. Ellie, once quiet and observant, bore the haunted look of someone who had stared too long into the abyss. Rachel resolved never to seek answers about the host or their motives. Some mysteries, she realized, were better left unsolved. But as they trudged away from Winterwood, the faintest hint of music reached their ears. A familiar holiday melody carried on the wind, as if the mansion's spirit lingered in the ashes. None of them looked back. The town of Black Hollow was dressed in garish holiday lights, but their glow was hollow. December had arrived without its usual splendor. No crisp chill in the air, no snowflakes swirling in the night sky. The fields remained barren, grass stubbornly green under a sun that refused to relent. For Lila, the unseasonable warmth felt like a mockery. She had dreamed of snow-dusted mornings and quiet evenings lit by the reflection of moonlight on white fields. But this year, Black Hollow was more summer than winter. Lila had always been a dreamer, her mind tethered to the fantastical tales in her collection of folklore books. One tattered volume, Old Winter Whispers, had become her obsession. It spoke of forgotten traditions and rituals to bring the magic of Christmas alive. She lingered over the pages late into the night, candlelight flickering against the cramped, handwritten text. Her favorite chapter was about summoning snow, an old custom to beckon winter's chill through a simple ritual. It was described as a ceremony for the lonely heart, requiring a silver bell, a sprig of holly, and a rhyme whispered at the stroke of midnight. The thought of conjuring snow herself was intoxicating. She could picture it already. The hush of snow-laden air, the world turned soft and quiet under a blanket of white. Anna, her best friend, had scoffed at the idea. Practical and grounded, Anna called it superstition and had warned her against messing with old things she didn't understand. But Anna wasn't the one stuck in a silent house with distant parents who cared more about their social clubs than their daughter. Lila was determined. She wanted magic just once. On the night of December 21st, the winter solstice, Lila gathered her tools. A silver bell stolen from her mother's holiday wreath, holly clipped from the bush outside her bedroom window, and her voice. She knelt on her bedroom floor, the pages of Old Winter Whispers spread before her like a sacred text. Her window was open, inviting the balmy night air into her room, a reminder of the unnatural warmth that surrounded her. She began the ritual. The bell chimed softly in the stillness as she recited the rhyme. Winter's breath, icy and slow, come forth now, bring your snow. The words rolled off her tongue, feeling both strange and familiar. A gust of wind, cold and sharp, rushed through her room. For the first time in weeks, the air carried the bite of winter. She smiled, triumphant. By the time she drifted to sleep, the first flakes were falling. Morning revealed a transformed world. Black Hollow lay under a glistening blanket of snow. Children screamed with delight as they tumbled into drifts. Cars inched cautiously along slippery roads. Lila beamed as she stepped outside, the crunch of snow beneath her boots a sound she had missed. But the joy was fleeting. She noticed something odd, a sense of being watched. Shadows flitted at the edges of her vision. But when she turned, there was nothing. The snow itself seemed to shift, the drifts forming shapes that vanished when she blinked. By the time she returned home, her chest felt heavy with unease. That night, the whispers began. Lila was jolted awake by faint murmurs outside her window. Peering through the frosted glass, she saw nothing but her snow-covered yard. Yet the whispers persisted, a low hum that seemed to seep into her bones. The shadows returned, slinking along her walls, twisting unnaturally in the dim light of her bedside lamp. The following days brought more signs. Animal tracks, impossibly large and clawed, appeared in the snow around her home. Icicles formed on her roof, sharp as knives, even though the temperature remained just above freezing. And the whispers, they grew louder. Sometimes they sounded like her name, carried on the wind. Sometimes they echoed from the corners of her room, just out of sight. Anna noticed Lila's exhaustion, the dark circles under her eyes. She pressed for an explanation, but Lila brushed her off, unwilling to admit what she had done. It wasn't until Anna stopped by unexpectedly one evening that the truth came out. Lila hesitated, but when Anna's gaze hardened, she confessed about the ritual and the snow. Anna's face paled as Lila spoke. She flipped through Old Winter Whispers, stopping at a page Lila had ignored in her excitement. The words were stark and chilling. The bell summons not only the frost but the frost watcher. He comes where he is called and stays where he is not banished. Beware his gaze. It sees what lies beneath. The realization hit Lila like a blow. She hadn't brought snow. She had summoned something. Something that had been waiting for centuries to be called. Black Hollow's snow no longer sparkled. It looked dull and gray under a sky that seemed too heavy, too low. Lila began to see him, the shape of a figure, just at the edge of her sight. Sometimes in the mirror, sometimes in the yard, a tall silhouette shrouded in white. His face was a blur, shifting and formless. But his eyes, two glacial orbs, pierced through her, freezing her in place whenever she caught a glimpse. She knew she had to act, but the ritual to banish him required far more than she had imagined. A sacrifice, a confrontation, and the courage to face what terrified her most. What began as a harmless wish for snow had turned into a nightmare. Christmas Eve loomed, and with it her chance to send the Frost Watcher back. But she was running out of time, and the whispers had started speaking of blood. Christmas Eve arrived, and Black Hollow wore its unnatural snowfall like a costume, beautiful but wrong. The townsfolk were drawn to the snow with a mix of awe and unease. In the town square, children built lopsided snowmen under their parents' wary gazes. Elders huddled in whispers at the cafe, their coffee cups trembling in their hands. People swore they heard faint voices in the wind, but when they turned, there was no one there. Mrs. Granger, the town historian, had her own theories. She sat in the library poring over old records, her gnarled fingers tracing newspaper clippings about strange weather in Black Hollow's past. She muttered about how the last time the snow came like this was in 1912, just before the mill burned down. Others dismissed her as a relic of the past, but her warnings lingered like an aftertaste. Teenagers from the high school dared each other to venture into the woods. Jared Fuller, the ringleader, claimed he saw something tall and weird moving between the trees. He laughed nervously, but his eyes betrayed fear. The dare ended quickly when the group heard a blood-curdling scream that seemed to come from nowhere. They scattered, tripping over drifts as they fled back to town. Meanwhile, Reverend Langley, the town's pastor, rang the church bells incessantly, summoning his congregation to pray. He preached about judgment and signs of the end times, his voice trembling as much from conviction as from fear. Few attended, but those who did left with a hollowness in their eyes. The snow was no longer a miracle. It was a curse. Lila felt the weight of the town's unease as she and Anna prepared for the counter-ritual. The clearing behind Lila's house was silent, save for the crunch of their boots in the snow. The tools, bell, holly, and a knife were laid out carefully, but Anna couldn't help glancing over her shoulder as if she expected something to leap from the darkness. A howl cut through the stillness, distant yet piercing. It wasn't a dog, and it wasn't human. The girls exchanged a glance but didn't speak. Lila's hands trembled as she rang the bell for the first time, the chime cutting through the night. The Frost Watcher emerged from the shadows, his towering figure a patchwork of frost, bone, and shifting snow. His presence pulled the air from their lungs, a suffocating cold that froze the words on their lips. But they weren't alone. The lights in nearby homes flickered as if the town itself sensed the battle taking place. Mr. Adler, the reclusive widower down the street, peeked through his frosted window with suspicion, muttering about things better left alone. The Birch twins, mischief-makers by day, clung to their parents, no longer laughing at the strangeness around them. The Frost Watcher's icy gaze fell on Lila, and she froze. His form shifted, distorting into something vaguely human but entirely wrong. As he advanced, she thought she saw the reflection of her mother's face in his chest, weeping and scornful. The Frost Watcher fed on fear, and the more Lila trembled, the stronger his presence grew. Anna screamed Lila's name, breaking her trance. She tossed the holly into the snow, grabbed the knife, and sliced her palm open. Blood dripped onto the snow, steaming in the frigid air. Frost that creeps, frost that binds. Return to shadow, leave no sign. The Frost Watcher hissed, a sound that rattled through the clearing like cracking ice. His spindly arms reached for Lila, but Anna rang the bell, each chime pushing him back. Shadows curled around his form, and he let out a guttural roar. But he wasn't done. He reached toward Anna, his form twisting and splitting into grotesque shapes. One moment he was a towering skeletal figure, the next a swarm of shadowed tendrils. A clawed hand shot out, grazing Anna's shoulder and leaving a trail of frostbite. Lila summoned her last ounce of courage. Raising the knife again, she carved a final sigil into the snow, her blood filling the grooves. Leave this place, this world, this time. I cast thee back, end the rhyme. The clearing erupted in a blinding light. The Frost Watcher shrieked as the shadows devoured him, his form imploding into a flurry of snow and ice. The wind died, leaving only silence and a bitter cold that clung to their skin. When the girls returned to town, the change was palpable. The snow no longer carried a sinister energy. The lights in homes burned steadily, and the eerie stillness was replaced by the faint hum of normalcy. But the scars remained. The Birch twins stayed close to their parents, no longer daring to explore the woods. Reverend Langley canceled Christmas Eve services, citing exhaustion, but some said it was because he had seen something in the churchyard that shook his faith. And Mrs. Granger sat alone in the library, furiously writing new entries into Black Hollow's record of strange events. Lila and Anna didn't speak of what happened. Lila cleaned her wound and buried the tools of the ritual at the edge of the clearing, far from prying eyes. But she couldn't shake the memory of the Frost Watcher's final gaze. His whispered promise echoed in her mind. This is not over. As the town settled into an uneasy calm, Lila noticed the edges of her vision were never truly clear. Shadows flickered in the corner of her eye, and on certain nights, the whispers returned. Black Hollow's snow had melted, but its chill lingered in her bones. The Frost Watcher might have been banished, but in a town like Black Hollow, nothing stays gone forever.